Hey everyone, welcome back to the Above Board podcast. I think most people think of retirement like their finish line or the end destination. You work, you save, you invest, you're building all towards this moment. And then one day you finally get to slow down and enjoy life. That's the dream. That's what all of us are working towards. The problem is, I don't think retirement is the finish line. I think it's kind of the start of a completely new race. Now, this goes for your money, and that's what we're mostly going to be talking about today. But this also goes for your life's mission and your fulfillment. I know far too many people that 6 to 12 months into their retirement life decide that they actually want to go back to work. Like they come out of retirement and they go back to work or they consult because they're bored. They're like, hey, John, I've done the things, I've done some travel, I've seen grandkids, I did a garden in my backyard. And I think the problem in that scenario is that they didn't do the things that maybe would help them find purpose and meaning and joy. And that is different than working towards this number, this end game that they needed to hit. And for so many people, their identity is wrapped up into that. Now, that's a totally different podcast for a different day. Actually, our newest advisor on the team, Brandon Hatcher, and I will be talking about that soon. So stay tuned. But today's problem is talking about being too focused on the strategy that gets you there, that gets you to retirement with your money specifically, and not considering the one that will carry you through retirement. And I know this is a bit of a silly analogy, but think of it like building a house. Like getting to retirement is almost sort of like finishing the construction part. That's the milestone. But once you move in, life starts. You need to furnish it. You need to maintain it. You're going to have repairs that come up and you need to budget for all those projects. You wouldn't just finish the house and be like, all right, cool. I'm never touching this or doing anything with it ever again. And retirement works the same way. The goal is not to just build the financial house, it's to maintain it, to live in it, to enjoy it, and make sure that it supports you for the next few decades of life when you're no longer earning income. And when most people think about investing to retirement, the common thought pattern is to imagine getting more conservative as they get closer to their last day of work. Lower volatility, fewer risks, protect the nest egg. And sure, that makes sense in the right context. That is quite literally what we are all taught about with our money. But here's the challenge. If you treat retirement like the end of the road and you dramatically reduce growth too early, then things like inflation and healthcare and taxes and market cycles and withdrawals, all of these things slowly chip away at your money. So investing through retirement means you still give your portfolio room to grow. Not recklessly, but thoughtfully, with a balance of stability and long-term growth. The average retiree right now is living 20, 30 years into retirement. That's a long time. And you're not just protecting your money, you're protecting your lifestyle, your independence, and your peace of mind. Let me give you a real story. I'm going to change the names, but the situation and circumstances are real. A couple came to us, and for this conversation, we're going to call them Mark and Susan. And they were retiring teachers. Incredible savers, the proverbial millionaire next door. They hit their retirement number, super proud of all the progress that they had made. However, they retired at a bad time. It wasn't their fault. They did all the right things. And they planned retirement to the end of that school year that they were working. And it was the school year of 2019 to 2020. And if you can recall what life was like back in 2020, you probably already know where this is going. They retired in the midst of a global pandemic, a government shutdown, and an economic crisis. And the markets at the worst had dropped over 30% in just about 3 weeks' time during March of that year. So literally 60 days before their retirement timeframe, the markets dropped over 30%. Fortunately, they maintained their investment approach. Unfortunately, other work colleagues of theirs did not. They had a friend that they shared with me. They had a friend that sold out of the market at the lowest point. Their portfolio was cut by about 1/3. Now, imagine that you're close to retirement. You've got $1 million saved up in your let's say your 401k, and it drops to around $670,000. Had that friend done nothing, had that friend not changed a thing, by December of that year, it would have been back up over $1 million. But because they sold, because they went to cash, they secured those losses. Mark and Susan, however, they stayed put. They didn't let their timeline of retirement impact their investment strategy. Now, I think their impulse was to go more conservative, but they knew that doing so at that very juncture of time would ensure that their money would shrink over time. Market volatility coupled with withdrawals for living expenses, and then what would later present, hindsight being 2020, but what would later present as serious inflation in the years to come, that would slowly have eroded their portfolio. Instead, they remained focused and steadfast. A mix of stocks and bonds, not high risk, just balanced growth and income, enough fuel to, I think, go the distance. And this is what we mean when we say investing through retirement instead of to retirement. Now, for many, this can require a change in thought process. It requires that same long-term patience and discipline that you applied during your saving years in your retirement years as well. So I'm going to use an illustration because I think it's powerful. I think it's useful. Imagine it's January 1 of 1999 and you retire with $1 million. You have two choices. Now, I'm not suggesting you do this, but this is for the example, for the illustrative effect. But you have two choices. Option one is you keep it invested in the S&P 500. Option two is you invest everything in bonds and you play it safe. If you stayed mostly in stocks, that $1 million would be worth roughly $8 million today. And if you moved it to bonds, you would be at about 3.4 million today. Same starting point, same time period. The only difference is, about a $4.5 million difference. And the only main change there is what we actually invested in. And people will say, yeah, but the markets crashed. They crashed. We had the .com crash. We had the Great Recession of '08. And those are all correct. And in that stretch, we saw more things. We had multiple recessions. We had the pandemic market crash that I mentioned. We had wars. We had rate cycles. We had inflation spikes. As recently as this year, we have had tariff concerns and conversations. As I'm recording this, we're almost, we're still in the midst of a government shutdown. And we're hopefully soon on the other side of that. But the point is, this is not a smooth road. And with all of those things, despite all those things, staying invested in growth meaningfully can have an important performance impact for you in the long run. Now, add in real retirement life behaviors. We've got withdrawals for things like healthcare. We have inflation concerns. We have taxes. We have travel. We have life that we want to live. And that conservative portfolio can sometimes struggle while the balanced growth investor had room to recover. The lesson here is quite simple. And if you take nothing away from this podcast, but this one message, please hear this. The greatest long-term risk is not market volatility. The greatest risk is running out of money while you still have life left to enjoy. You do not retire your portfolio just because you yourself retire. It still has a job to do. Now, again, this is not done with reckless abandon. This conversation is not, don't hear me saying, hey, we should be in all stocks and in no bonds or that's not the case. It does possibly require reshaping how we define risky, because I think market volatility is far less risky than running out of money. Everything in life is risky, but it requires diligent conversation and understanding around risk and putting a strategy and a portfolio together that makes sense. And we can take these smart and calculated decisions through retirement, the same ones that got us to that retirement goal. We can take them through retirement with us. The win is not arriving at retirement with the biggest number possible. It is staying confident and secure all the way through retirement. As always, thanks for listening to the Above Board podcast. If this at all shifted your way of thinking, share it with someone close to you. We don't advertise on this show. We don't have sponsors on this show because we love doing these conversations, doing these episodes and having conversations just like this one. Thank you to our podcast community of listeners. You guys keep us motivated to keep showing up consistently and having these discussions. We'll see you next week. Bye.